Hello and welcome to Solve, a SaaSOps Live virtual event, episode 32-ish and a bit, I think. And today we, a small group of SaaSOps professionals, are going to talk about asset management. How do we manage all of our things, whether they're laptops and all the other bits that IT professionals need to use? We used to do it with a pen and paper. We used to do it in an Excel spreadsheet. Hopefully you transitioned to a Google Sheet. Maybe you were brave enough back in the day to do it in Microsoft Access, but you probably graduated to an ITSM platform. Maybe you're doing it in Azure AD and Jamf, knowing what actually your users are logging into and connecting in. But I think it's more than just recording serial numbers. Now it's a logistics game with a distributed staff. We no longer do we have or want that previous easy life of all of our tech and its support functions being in an office. So how do we manage it? Who's mastered it? Who's waiting for that utopia solution? So afternoon, guys. Thank you for joining us. So a bit of history for myself and asset management. When I joined the company that I'm with 12 years ago, I created a open office document to record the serial numbers, and I kept it on the file server. And I soon realized that was not going to scale well. So I switched that ODT file to being a Google Doc. And since early 2011, I've had a Google Doc running. Audit is the name of that file, and my London colleagues are still filling it in. It's a terrible mess now, got a lot of tabs, got a lot of filtering, got a lot of conditional access, but we can still track who's got what, and we cross-tabulate it with reports out of Azure AD and other platforms that we have. Obviously, we've had on before Freshservice to see their platform. They do a really good asset management in there. Virtually every ticketing system seems to have asset management service now, etc. And there are specialist applications and free services that out there will do discovery or put an agent on the machine and get it to report in. So who's struggling? Who has a workable solution? Who's looking for a different solution? And then the logistics of not just being able to hand somebody a laptop when they walk into the office, because nobody's walking into offices anymore. How do we get them their stuff? And then how do we get it back, and how do we track it? Who has a stack of FedEx boxes from laptop returns in their office that needs to be cut open and the serial number's gone through, and you're trying to do that and do everything else at the same time when you only go into the office a few days a week? Yes, I have a lot of colleagues that are dealing with that. So welcome Brian and Steve as well to the show. Asset management.
Ryan's actually in witness protection. You can't see his face.
Yes, yeah. I think it's the blur on the outside background. That's what it is.
There he is.
There he is.
Secret agent.
I know there is an update coming to Google Meet. Obviously, we're on Zoom at the moment, so we can do the grid recording, but it should be adjusting those skin tones and colors or coloration when you're in shadows. So that'd be great to see. Who wants to speak first? Who wants to offer their trouble, their pain points, the solutions that they've got, their views on it?
I'll kick it off, I suppose.
Thank you. Otherwise, it'd be a very short show, and I would have just said thank you.
Got to get things started here. Yeah, I've talked about this a little bit before, and we've had some issues on this. We're not a large company. We're not a startup with a massive IT team or a lot of. We have cloud-based applications, but we don't have dedicated systems in place for handling remote employees and how to get equipment to them. So we've been kind of trying to figure it out. During COVID, it was kind of, I'm sure as it was for everybody, chaos. Devices were just flying out the door as fast as we could provision them, as fast as we could get them set up. And sometimes even before that, it'd be like, just go to Best Buy, find whatever you can, go get it, right? And sometimes that still happens. And so now we're actually doing a complete company-wide asset audit, going through all of our notes, all of the different places where we have notes. We have 500 employees, probably 400 of them have various devices of different types, things that were assigned or not assigned. And, they have asset tags and somewhere the data is there, but it's not all in one place. And so we're doing that company-wide audit, which has been pretty good so far. We've also uncovered a couple of caches of older hardware that needs to be picked up and recycled that have just been sitting in offices for years because, the small real estate offices, we have 100 locations. They don't ever tell us, or if they do, they tell us and then, it gets lost in a ticket somewhere and they forget entirely, or we forget entirely, or whatever it is. And so we're trying to work right now to kind of get a handle on this because we have this issue of remote employees now that we're shipping a lot more equipment to, and whether they're employees that are remote because we hired them remote, which we're now doing for the first time in the company's history, thank you, COVID, or they're remote because they've just been working from home and they're like, screw that, I'm not coming back to the office, of which I am one of those people. This is my home office. I love it. I'm staying put. So we've looked into First Base, which is a company that is both kind of device management and logistical shipping operations. They are one of the loudest voices out there when it comes to talking about the shift to remote work and all the big companies that are doing it. But their pricing model doesn't make a whole lot of sense for a company like us, so we've not gone with them yet. But essentially, they do everything from buying and holding the equipment for you to provisioning it, shipping it out, and then making sure that it gets back. Unfortunately, if it doesn't, like if the employee says, screw you guys, I'm keeping it, that's HR's problem. That's not their problem. So I think that's a struggle that a lot of people are going to be up against. But for us, it's trying to figure out that whole logistical side, which is, yes, do we just ship them a FedEx box, or do we tell them to go and put it together and hope it comes back in one piece? Or in some cases, hey, it's going to cost us $200 to ship that monitor back to us. The monitor's not worth $200. Just keep it. We've done that with Chromebooks. We've done that with, headsets. It's just like, okay, well, we're not really going to reissue that anyway. Just keep it and we'll write it off or something. And so that's been a real challenge for us. I just last night discovered another service. I'm trying to remember the name of it. It was like Fast Dog, something like that, or Retriever, something dog similar. Maybe one of you guys have heard of it, where they just do the box shipping, sending, receiving. They ship out a pre-labeled box and it comes back and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, the some of the biggest challenges that we're facing are, well, sourcing hardware in the first place. But if you can get your hands on hardware, shipping it out to them, do we do it in a box that is, a welcome kit and it's all branded and very nice, or do we just throw stuff at them from Amazon and Best Buy and anywhere else we can get the hardware? And then on the flip side, when the employee is leaving or something breaks, okay, how the hell do we get it back? And how do we, standardize? Hello, Retriever. Yes, thank you, Brian. Drop that in the chat there. How do we standardize and automate as much of this process as possible? And so the final piece of that I'll put here and then I'll shut up is that we started using Blissfully, and Blissfully has not the the world's greatest device tracking, but we are using it for all of our SaaS, and we are almost 100% cloud-based, SaaS-based company. And so we were like, all right, we're already paying for this. We've got it in here, and it's relatively easy for us to put the devices in. We've played around with Fresh Services thing to do it. It was overly complex for our needs, and so we abandoned that. We are using Fresh Service for our help desk, but we needed something that was going to be much faster and easier to implement and automate. And Blissfully is kind of our single source of truth for who has what in the company. And so that's what we're using now. And now I'll shut up.
I was going to say, it's interesting you mentioned automation, because obviously automation is a real key point if you're looking to do zero-touch deployment, because you've got to have that sort of order and hold and then ship, because it's very difficult to do. Back in the day, Apple would ship a machine in, a standard MacBook in a couple of days, and even Dell, you could do the 48-hour ship configuration. So you could almost do a just-in-time shipment of a device that's bound to your domain or your MDM platform, whether it's Jamf or Intune, and get it shipped to the end user for configuration, but it's a lot harder now with the supply chains. But so you need that partnership with somebody to hold it. And also, Jesse, what you said about monitors, we don't ask them to be returned because they're 150, less than $200. They cost more. All we ask is that they don't go into a landfill. They get used or given away. Other people's thoughts on the subject? Hello, others that have joined in stealth mode.
At Honey, I used Asset Panda, and I work with Cmdb to asset tag those devices. And it was great because as I was buying like a $40,000 projector or stuff like that, that you had to like, kind of keep track of, or mobile carts or things like that, it was kind of helpful. At PayPal, they had a kind of custom asset tag system, but I worked with FedEx to generate like QR codes to give to offboards that they can walk in and they'll pay. PayPal will then pay for the box, and you let FedEx package everything basically, rather than trust them, because after like the 18th monitor you get back broken, you're like, I don't need this anymore. And in trying to get returns, right, like you got to reduce the barrier to returning, because otherwise people just don't do it. And I'm looking for a solution at Forma right now, so that's why I'm interested. So I don't have anything great, but yeah, Blissfully was one option I'm looking at, and we use Kanji right now, so I'm at least pretty secure in what we have going forward. But like, obviously, you got to handle offboards, which isn't a massive concern right now, but it will grow.
Yeah, interesting how you said asset tags. I remember, the corporate laptops would have that little corporate sticker, and it would have the barcode. And I know in Freshservice, in the Freshservice app, you can scan barcodes. And I did it once when we first got Freshservice. I thought it was really cool, but I've never always feared that those labels advertised that it was a corporate machine and which company it was from, etc. They're normally branded, and then end users might pick them off. And then if I was relying on that as being the asset tracking, and they could come off so easily. That's why I think serial numbers are very good, because they're normally built into the BIOS, or discoverable in the BIOS. So even if the back of the laptop has been scraped off and you can't read it, you can get it out of the BIOS, unless that machine has had its motherboard changed, and then that's a whole other can of worms. But
PayPal did that too, by the way. They part of CDW's onboarding package for every device, they had to like bake in the asset tag number into the BIOS for each device. Yeah. And there were some crazy strong asset tags. Obviously, I think everything can be chipped away at, but like, those crazy thin aluminum ones that you spend 16 days trying to like nudge off, and like, so, but yeah, I agree. It never really came up on laptops that I needed to use a QR code, but there were some times with like mobile devices around an office that it would kind of come up to be, how old is this thing? Wait a minute, like, so.
Right. And it's, if you're big enough, you can have those deals with FedEx to, just walk in and say, this has got to go to who, to whatever company. I know with Comcast, we canceled a service in one of our offices, and I was like, where do I ship it to? And they said, oh, just take the unit to FedEx and tell them it's going to Comcast. They'll box it up and ship it back with, for free. And it's like, if you were big enough and you could have that deal with FedEx, it makes it so much easier than having to send somebody a box and then hope that they, don't lose that box, recycle that box before sending the laptop back.
So we're not even tracking assets below a certain amount, like $50. I don't care. Goodbye. Yeah. Keyboard and mouse, great. You want another one? Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of companies are starting to do like thresholds that are even higher than that. Like finance companies I've worked for in the past are hitting like $200, $500 even, that they just don't care tracking anything below that, right? Obviously, they're not wanting us to spend that regularly, right? Not just like replace things here and there. But when it comes to like tracking the asset, the thresholds are getting pretty high, right? And curious of kind of like why that's happening, but
yeah, so
capitalization probably.
Yeah, I wonder if companies do evaluations of, X user has been with us for 6 months, their laptop still has 2.5 years warranty on it, it's worth us getting it back. Bob's been with us for 3.5 years. His laptop went out of warranty last year. We're not going to reissue it to somebody. We might as well remotely wipe it and let Bob have it, or get it donated to a charity or recycling place.
Yeah, I know you can do things like that in like Asset Panda, right? You can set like depreciation time, like schedules with the mounts and that kind of stuff, and then make more educated decisions on that. I think it's super important, right? I think if you're gonna have a machine that has a 3-year life cycle, you get it back after a year and a half, you have an average self time of 6 months in your inventory. Is it worth shipping out for another year before you have to life cycle it? Probably not, right? It's probably better to just have somebody resell it for you and then recoup some of that cost back and purchase a whole new laptop.
Yeah,
I think on that point, basically it's a 3-year life cycle if somebody is an existing employee and they're due for like a renewal. But essentially, for all intents and purposes, we'll look at like a 1-year life cycle on this unit. Work with finance to depreciate that thing over the course of a year. And then at that point, once that thing has met that 1-year criteria, it becomes less of an issue. Right. I think to Jesse's point, you got to work with HR when things need to come back, and that should be HR's problem and not IT's issue. Often falls into IT's realm, but working with finance, HR, and setting those expectations, I think, is really important.
Yeah, it's incredibly labor intensive. Certainly in the last couple of years, as staff have been fluid in their movements. Certainly, if they're leaving. People have often been leaving employment to go somewhere else physically as well as work-wise. So we've had problems where there's a very small window to get a box, and if you're sending out, if you're using another service or part of the business to send out the box, and they're obviously sending it the cheapest way. If you hit somebody's vacation period or a bank holiday and it gets federal holiday, it gets missed, and then it takes 4 days to get there, and that person's already packed up and moved, then is it worth it in the meantime? If you think of all of the touch points that we have to go through, makes me almost need a spreadsheet on the time cost analysis of returning and processing a device rather than remotely wiping it and having it reused or donated. So I'm now going to rethink our practice for the last 2 years.
How long does everybody spend currently like on retrievals? I feel like for one, I'm spending I was spending 1 to 2 hours going back and forth in emails, trying to coordinate timing, trying to coordinate where they're going to be, right? Because it's like, you could default, which is what a lot of people are doing now with these APIs, are defaulting to like the address in the HRS. You can't rely on that though, because again, they could have moved. Now in this remote world, they're working in different places, so they could have moved and just not told the employer. We had that a lot happen at my previous company. It was just like impossible to keep up with. We were just spending hours and hours and hours. And so like, obviously like services like Retriever help with that. But the coordinations where we were spending most of our time going back and forth the employee, trying to figure out all the logistical side of things, where they're going to be in timing and that kind of stuff. Just curious what other people are spending their time on when it comes to that kind of stuff.
We offloaded a lot of that portion to HR.
Nice, that's smart.
It's like HR has basically, once we issue an asset to somebody, we get the asset tag and serial number, and it goes into paperwork that goes into their system attached to the employee profile. When that employee is no longer going to be working for the company, it's their responsibility to collect those things and then check with us to make sure that everything is there upon receipt.
That's smart.
Yeah,
All HR departments are made equal. Some are larger than others.
I've been beating them into shape for years. It's been a fight, but they're wonderful. We really are. It's come a long way from where it was before, and a lot of the systems that I put in place in the past, in terms of some of the automation stuff that I've done, have been because the HR team was not timely about anything. They would term somebody and wouldn't tell us for weeks, or they wouldn't even do the paperwork for weeks, which even if I had it in the system or had a system in place, it wasn't reliable data. But now they're on top of every single one of those, and they know that they have to work with the IT department to say, hey, this person's access needs to be removed ASAP, etc. And yeah, now we can rely on them for things like this.
Yes, the JML process is not just creating accounts and disabling accounts. It's deploying the equipment and retrieving the equipment as well. Is anybody else using just a plain Google Sheet to track assets and serial numbers and who has them, or are people using applications like the data? No, what was it? Panda,
Asset Panda, Snipe
Asset
IT. What's the one with the double O's? It's like Nida, Zeta, something like that.
Nitsa.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're
such a weird
extremely
name.
expensive, I think.
Yeah. If
Yeah.
you can, and if you can get to those salespeople, like.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they have a really interesting platform. It's a lot bigger than just like asset management. But they're so big in the space and that kind of stuff. They cater to enterprises, right? Most of the time, it's like they're looking for big dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Fresh Service is interesting in that if you are interested in having all of the elements there and having that level of integration, the thing that I discovered with them is they only actually charge you for the assets if it's managed assets, which is through their network discovery tool. So a remote company, if you're talking about putting things in the system, you can literally have unlimited assets in their system assigned to people's profiles without having to pay for any of them.
Yeah, it is useful having their agent on there because it does do some software discovery and auditing that you can get out of there. And it is very useful for if you have the machine actually correctly assigned to the user, so that when they put in a ticket, you have the easy history of all that machine, even if it was previously belonged to somebody else and had recurring issues or something, or you could have all of the warranty information. When we used to use Dell Case for our asset management, and then I think it was Quest Case, and then Dell bought it, and then it became Quest Case again. But that was really good because it was a Dell product. It would tie into their warranty API or warranty system, and you could run a report easily on all of the warranty expiration dates for all of your devices, which was very easy come budget season when you're asked, how many machines do you want to replace? You could just easily run a report and see what was expiring. Now it's a case of in a more manual world of knowing when the laptop was bought, running, filtering for those months. Has anybody got any other, I guess, financial asset component plugged in or thought out?
I think the thing that we looked at again at previous companies were price per employee, like how much we were spending on assets per employee, which is super helpful for finance to be able to say, cool, like when we're hiring and offboarding, like we're spending X amount of money on assets, we're spending this much money on logistics. Life cycle happens, then they offboard, like what does that look like? And a certain tenure, right? Like the average tenure is like maybe 2 years, right? So I think little metrics like that were super helpful for us, just like headcount planning, managing spend a little bit better, right? I think these are costs that can get out of hand pretty quickly if you really think about it. Imagine like, all these accessories people are requesting, especially at larger companies that just give out accessories per request, right? I can just like go in a store and just order a bunch of cables and that kind of stuff. If you're not tracking that per employee, like you really don't know how much you're spending. You just attribute it to this overall IT budget, but like, where does that actually go back to? Like, does this go back to certain departments, headcount? Like, are there certain roles that need more equipment than other roles? Like those type of metrics are super helpful for finance at least. Those reports are hard to get though and hard to develop.
Yeah, I have a simple sheet that does a cost per employee. When we add a new SaaS application that might be deployed, or we have a change in the license agreement, either a reduction or an increase in the cost, I've just put it in the sheet, and then finance can use it to put some predictions of what expansion would cost. And obviously you have I'm sure like most companies, you have the core applications that everybody has to have, and then there's the sometimes need due to client needs or specific roles of their job. But it is a lot easier, I think, to look at some of the SaaS applications or expenditure on assets, if you look at it instead of a large bill that you have to pay, if you break it down into a cost per employee, it's a lot easier to manage. And as you said, forecast for finance.
Yeah.
Does anybody use something like Xylo to manage and get a sort of better insight?
Like software management.
Yeah, like I think, we talk about like asset management. I think about asset management in a, I guess, slightly different way, because there's the device assets and then there are other assets that we got to think about. And so I think about the whole challenge of like, how do you integrate Cmdb with your ticketing system, right? So that's always been kind of like what I've been thinking about. Like we have Jamf, so that's all of our, I guess, end user computing devices are. But we think about other, SaaS usage, right? SaaS accounts, those are assets as well. So, and we also even think about like access to something. Those are assets. That's how we think about it. And so how do we try to like bring in all of them in a single platform? So I've actually tried this crazy thing with Jira, and I think Jira Insight, you can literally build a CMDB off of it, right? Like you can basically make your own schema and create all of these asset items and templates. But that's like someone's full-time job, just trying to get that going. And we basically said, okay, this is not feasible. So what we ended up actually doing was we actually use Okta, which is our IDP, and anything that we consider, even if it's business services, we actually like create a tag, meaning like a placeholder. So we have all of our assets or access, right? Apps. And then we try to kind of keep track that way, just so that it's in sort of single pane of glass. So when it comes to provisioning and deprovisioning, at least we have it all in the console. So when it comes to deprovisioning, you see a user and then you see like the list of everybody's, like that person's access, and we can sanitize and treat that way. Yeah. So that's kind of like what we are thinking, what we're doing at the moment. But I do feel like maybe we need to have a greater conversation on how we can integrate that with our ticketing system. So we use, Jira for ticketing, for ITSM, a module that we use. So we want to automate some of these, taking care of assets automatically upon request.
Interesting. It's interesting that you're using the term asset not just to mean the physical laptop, monitor, keyboard, mouse, expensive creative tablet. That's my symbol, gesture for a tablet, or digital camera, or whatever else might be a company asset that has been allocated to a member of staff. But you're thinking it as an asset being a license or access to something as well. Maybe that's the mindset, certainly with more BYOD, that we need to get.
Yeah. Like the way we think about it is, if it's a computer or a mobile device, we consider them assets and they need to be returned. And the reason why that's important is not because of the how much it's worth. It's really just the data inside it that we're more concerned about. So we have a capability to basically remote wipe that computer. At that point, it kind of becomes a disposable, just like monitors, keyboards, or any other peripheral. So we actually consider them disposables. So we don't actually expect them to come back, because it actually sometimes costs more money to get them back, right? And it's not like we're gonna, as someone said, we're not gonna redeploy them. But the computers, we try to get it back, and we do get it back because we actually have every machine. We're Mac, Apple shop, so all of our endpoint devices are all in Jamf. And so we know exactly, how many we have and whether we got them back or not.
That's why we brought Blissfully on board. Blissfully is like Xylo and SaaS, automated SaaS management. It picks it up either from people's logins with Google or from CSV uploads of our transaction data that we put in. And then because we were already doing the digital asset tracking in there, that's when we started doing the device tracking in there, even though it wasn't as thorough as some of the other platforms that are out there. It's better to have it all in one place, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
You get a single user view.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you can go in the user and blissfully and see like all their login stuff. You can see the devices they have. Blissfully is a really great tool, and then they have that partnership with vendor now that does SaaS procurement.
It's more than a partnership. I thought it was a buyout.
A buyout, yeah,
Merger,
but,
whatever.
Merge, yeah, whatever they want to call it. But yeah, mixed reviews on vendor from what I've heard. It's like depending on your account rep, they're actually helpful. Other ones are just they assign contracts for you basically.
Yeah, I've been a little curious and yet hesitant, and since now that we're blissful users, I imagine at some point they're going to do some kind of a discount or drive to convert blissful users over into vendor users. But I mean, there's a lot of questions around. Okay, well, if we leave vendor, what happens to all of those contracts, or who owns those contracts, or how do we get support for those contracts? Things like that that I would want answered before I even went down that road. But they have something that is very enticing to a lot of people, is that they promise to save you more money than they cost in the first year, or they'll give you a check. It's like, okay, easy peasy to try it then. So we'll probably go down that road at some point. But yeah, it's becoming more of an issue as you have more, especially with teams that have their own credit cards to buy software. Shadow IT has never been a worse problem than it is today, I would imagine.
Yeah, and then we use vendor, in a way that was pretty cool at my previous job. But we use it in a way where it centralized all of our SaaS procurement. So any part of any department, regardless of if you're director, head of, chief, whatever, you had to go through the vendor process to vet out at least 3 options. And then that would work. They would come through IT for an assessment, security for assessment, legal for an assessment. So it kind of forced people through that process. So it cut down our shadow IT. It's not going to perfect, like obviously remove all of it, right? People are still going to go buy stuff on their credit cards and that kind of thing. But it did significantly reduce it by centralizing our workflows through a single vendor and a single person.
Yeah, the onboarding of vendors, depending on the size of your organization and how rigid their or managed their processes are, can be a timely, complicated process, which obviously sometimes doesn't meet the needs of the business or the end user. So good to hear you've got a system that was quite robust. All right. Any other thoughts on asset management? Tool tips, tricks?
I'm curious, how is everybody handling like repairs, remote workers, and like mid-life cycle like asset management?
Yes, repairs is a good one, because repairs used to be easy when you're in the office, because every IT professional is born with one of those tiny little screwdrivers in their hands. But trying to replace a battery or get some RAM reseated because the machine is blue screening is very difficult when, Peter, Paul, and Mary don't know the first thing about how to take the back off of a laptop. And some of the backs off of those laptops aren't designed to be taken off. They don't have a little access panel for the memory anymore. You've got to take the whole thing off out of the back and have the courage to pop those little clips that I've had to do a couple of times on my wife's laptop, which scares me all the time.
Yeah, I mean, somebody just popped in the comments here, like, send a loaner and replace it. I've heard like kind of the strategy most people are going with now is just hot swaps, right? Just swap out the machine, do the repair, send it to the OEM to get it repaired, do it yourself, and then pop it right back into your inventory, right? Seems like it's works, but it's not the most efficient, right? Just curious if anybody has any other solutions that they've been working with or trying to do. Or they feel like that's good enough, right? Do we feel like that's a good process? I feel like it's like very cumbersome and like you're coordinating logistics on top of facilitating the repairs. It's a lot.
I think it is a lot of logistics to build the spare ship the spare, get the person to use the spare, send the other one back, or wait for Dell or Lenovo or HP or whoever to turn up on site if they're willing to have that happen to replace the part. We've had it where we've shipped the worst case we shipped the laptop. It was a simple problem. I can't remember what it was. Maybe it was a broken screen or something. Shipped the laptop a spare, got the Dell repair box to go to the end user. End user sent it to Dell. Dell repaired it, weren't supposed to wipe the hard disk, shipped it back to the end user. End user turns it on, it's got no OS. So then the end user had to ship it to us. We rebuilt it, shipped it back to them, and then they shipped back their original one. And it must have been in hindsight, a better, easier option, because that was a lot of touch points and a lot of time.
Yeah, for us, it depends. Sorry, for us, it depends a little bit on where that remote employee is located. So we now have operations in Southern California, Las Vegas, Nevada, and San Antonio, Texas, which we're just spinning up now. So if anybody knows any field techs looking for a job in San Antonio, please let me know. So if they're within range of one of those offices, we have techs in each of those areas that have an office, and they can bring it in over there and either get it fixed on site if it's something that is a rather quick fix, or if it's something that that just needs to be swapped out, is relatively easy, or we can just give them a replacement and have it done. What we've also started doing in some of our more remote locations that have a larger presence where we don't yet have an office, a tech office over there, is staging Chromebooks. It's like, okay, HR over in that region, you have 3 Chromebooks. Let us know if you use them for X, Y, and Z. Or we'll say, okay, this person needs to come to that person, comes to HR and get a Chromebook. Or we just order a new one from Best Buy. That's your loaner until we fix your Windows laptop or something along those lines, just because got to keep them working. But for the real remote ones, yeah, that's tough.
Yeah,
we got one guy in Minnesota. He's 2 hours from the closest airport. It's not like I can even fly over and help him.
Oh, wow.
Just wait until the lake freezes and then snowmobile over across the lake. That's one of the things I miss from the office days, is when somebody has a problem with their computer, you just open the grab and go Chromebook drawer and say, take this Chromebook, make sure you return it in 2 days, or else it's going to stop working and tell you have to return it to us because we've got a lockout timer. You can't keep it, and fix their laptop and take the Chromebook back. And then they say, oh, I really like the Chromebook. I'm going to come and check it out every day and use that. So
does that mean everyone's buying the extended warranties, as in, like the Apple Care Plus and all that for devices now?
For real remote employees, yes, actually, we have started buying them more often.
Yeah, I noticed that too, that I'm buying it. I didn't do it at Honey or anything like that. We were able to support. But now being able to just say, hey, take it to your local Apple store, or talk to the Apple chat, or, one of those types of things.
Yeah, I think there's an Advantage program they have. We used Business Advantage, whatever it's called. I can't remember.
Apple Care Enterprise?
Something like that, yeah, where I did it when we had a remote office and it was full of creatives. It's like, if their Macs don't work, I don't have any spares. So I paid for this service. I think it was like $100 per user per year. If their Mac broke, they'd walk into a store and they'd instantly give them a loaner while they fixed the other one. Never had to use it, but it was a wonderful insurance and relatively cost efficient when you look at the lost productivity for all of those users. That's when it comes down to doing those figures as a cost per user analysis.
Yeah, it's been pretty interesting to see like the different warranties that Apple's kind of stood up around this, right? Apple Care Plus Enterprise is like, you can work with service partners, whatever, drive over, they'll swap your computer right on the spot or give you a loaner. And, the question being, now that loaner doesn't really have your security software, right? It's probably not an ABM. So what does that mean, right? We all know data transfers don't work with a lot of MDMs, right? Somebody bigger system just ends up creating duplicate records, or causes the MDM agent not to work. You have to, do some sudo commands. Like, it's pretty interesting to see them offer these things, but it doesn't really solve. It just opens more issues for one security side, but also IT in terms of like builds and that kind of thing as well.
Yeah. On the Windows side, we did some evaluation on the pros and cons of the extended warranty and the cost for a repair or the cost for writing off a machine over the overall cost of getting the warranty. If you're getting the warranty for 1,000 machines, but only 2 of them or 20 of them ever die, is it worth the additional cost of the warranty? When we tried to do that at one point. We stopped doing the accidental warranty. I used to do accidental warranty, but then realized the number of people who are breaking laptops and TFT screens, it wasn't worth having that accidental warranty. It was easier just to pay the $300 or $400 to replace the screen or write the whole device off when it broke, rather than paying the additional cost. So all part of dealing with and managing assets, whether they are physical or logical, I guess, if it's a SaaS license. In the last few minutes, any final thoughts? I always love these Jerry Springer final thoughts.
International shipping is obviously a whole nother can of worms now. Getting stuff to international employees is definitely a challenge. So you want to build in lead time with your recruiting and HR folks to set expectations accordingly.
Yes. Yeah. International is a whole other pain point. I think all of us, apart from Andy, who's in stealth mode, and Brian's in the Great White North, up there in Canada. I'm surprised it's not snowing in Calgary today, but it looks beautiful there.
You may have jinxed it.
We're all in North America, which we to forget that there's the rest of the world, and there's a lot of people in those, just as people move from LA to New York, people move from Australia to Indonesia and transfer within those companies. And then, what do you do with the laptops and the asset at that stage? Difficult. One thing we won't solve this hour, but certainly was a good discussion point. Anybody got anything else?
I was going to add, don't forget about international keyboards. That's another gotcha.
Yeah. That's been the tricky thing that we've seen, is that, from procurement standpoint, obviously, like, international vendors are hard to manage too, right? You have language barriers, you have currency issues, transfers, all that kind of stuff like that, right? And then when it comes to procuring the right, especially in Europe, right? Procuring the right keyboards in different languages and that kind of stuff. I've seen people use, like, they'll push configs with, like, Apple has, like, you can change the keyboard layout digitally, right? And then they'll, like, keyboard covers over top, but it doesn't, there's, like, different keyboard layouts on a lot of these machines too. So it's like, you can't even do that half the time. So that's been something that was very interesting to see people try to navigate. See people procure and then just resell afterwards. They don't have to worry about, like, holding those stocks and trying to redeploy those. But yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, keyboards are very important. I'm still down here below me. I've got an English keyboard. I still like to use an English keyboard because I like the backspace down by the Z key or the Z key, as opposed to wherever it is on the actual laptop, the US laptop. It doesn't make any sense. It should be down by the Z key. I like it when I'm doing my backslashes. Although I can't remember the last time I did a backslash, but it was always useful when you're going into file servers back in the day. So
also, I was going to say, being a remote company, not having a commercial address in some of these, like, places, like, it's very hard to do business, get, like, a business account or anything set up without a kind of commercial address.
Yeah.
What about
virtual office?
Does anybody deal with home office allowance and just say, hey, buy your own stuff, we're only gonna send you computer and a phone, if that, phone, you need to have a business reason, but we're only sending you, computer and a YubiKey, and that's it.
Yeah. I think companies that I've seen they've been defaulting the kits, right? So they have like a standard kit. They'll just send you everything. I've seen them use forms to then choose what's optional, right? So like a desk, monitor, keyboard, mouse. You might already have that stuff, so like let's make that optional. But like obviously we're going to send you a computer and maybe a mobile device, right? I've seen companies start popping up where like my company right now, we're in stealth mode, but we're building out a solution where we'll have an employee store where you can just give your employees a stipend annually, biannually, quarterly, and you curate the devices or cables or accessories that they want them to have. It could be perks even too. Like maybe they don't want to spend their money on a mouse and keyboard, upgraded mouse and keyboard. They just want to spend their money on Grubhub coupons and stuff like that. Like even past that, you can just kind of give that like home office stipend to like buy snacks and that kind of stuff. So I think some cool solutions are coming out around there, and it's been kind of interesting to see I think every company's doing it a little differently right now. There's no real standard way of doing it just yet. And I think that's kind of the future, right? I think people want employee choice over benefits, perks, how we're spending our money at home, building our own space out, that kind of stuff. So,
and not to like plug Forma, but like that's what their kind of thing is, right? So you just get $200 to be well package and buy whatever you want. And I'm working on them to add like the marketplace to actually add like technology. I don't need massages. I want like, keyboard options and stuff like that. Right. So, that's what I'm pushing for in the marketplace. But I think as they do that, they'll hopefully some of the other big companies that are signed with us will find that useful, take that off their plate.
Yeah. Certainly a lot more companies doing the stipends, and with the great resignation and people moving from one company to another, maybe everybody will have a monitor and will no longer be needing to from their previous employer who hasn't asked for it back, so they can just carry on using it at their new position. So. All right, well, we're almost out of time. So I will thank everybody for joining and taking part in this discussion. I hope everybody found this beneficial, and keep track of your assets, write down your serial numbers, keep a note of your purchase dates and when everything is expiring.
I remembered one interesting thing I'll add just at the end here is in a couple of tech groups that I'm in, this has been noticed. There are a lot more business class monitors and computers that are showing up in places like Facebook Marketplace because we're just giving them away to people, and people are going, hey, I can make $100. So if you're looking for a cheap, used device at home, there's probably now is probably a good time to go and check all that out and hit up Facebook Marketplace trying to find a good high quality business monitor for cheap.
Good to know.